So I'm going to talk about aligning QA needs to the startup journey and market forces, and try and help everyone to understand what it is that quality should be doing for you. So quality, it's what we're all about, and I'm here to tell you that I think that it will speed up your journey as a startup. It will speed up your journey if you're looking at introducing new technologies in existing companies. It'll save you money. You might think testing is an expensive business, and it's a very common preconception that testing is a very expensive bit that happens at the end. And if you just did it at the end, then it tends to be very expensive, yeah. And quality will help you to delight your customer. And at the end of the day, that's what you need to be doing. With the social media that are out there now, everyone's got a megaphone. Something they're not happy about, they'll tell the world, and they'll tell them so fast that you can't react and your brand is damaged. So quality is going to work for you in these ways if you focus on it. So a bit about the startup journey. We've got some great startups here today. You have a great idea in a pub one day, cheer it around with your mates, and it makes a lot of sense when you've had a few pints. But the seed's sown, and the next morning you wake up and you know what, it still makes sense, and you think there could be some legs to this, and you start to nurture that seed, and you start looking for advice, and you put everything behind it. And as an entrepreneur, your passion, your whole energy, your money, everything you've got goes into this, and to grow that hopefully into a mighty oak. It's a difficult journey, it takes a special kind of person. And what I'd like to suggest is if we can just re-inject a focus on quality, you can help to manage those market forces. Market forces can work for you, can work against you. A greenhouse will help to really nurture that seedling of an idea you've got and speed it up. So a bit about the Gartner hype cycle. The Gartner hype cycle is about understanding the journey of a new technology from its inception, if you like, through to it being productive. So the hype cycle as a model works very well. You start with an idea, you've got a technology trigger. Nobody really knows about it. You start to generate hype. That hype grows and grows and grows, and then you reach a peak of hype, at which point you get a lot of people looking at your product and going, oh, actually, it doesn't meet the hype. It's not doing what I wanted it to do. There's a lot of disillusionment, and you slump down into this trough. A lot of businesses will go out of business at that point. But if you can survive it and pull out, you then start to reach a point where you're productive. Your product is doing what you're expecting it to, and more importantly, your product is doing what your customers are expecting it to do. And what we're suggesting is, with a better focus on quality from the start, you can mitigate some of those peaks and troughs a little bit. And we're going to focus today on the startup area. Once you get through to this point, you're kind of succeeding. Your business is viable. There'll be challenges still that come along, but in terms of technology and in terms of startup, you're through the big problems around here at that point. UTest as a startup, it's a great example of hype. There's a lot of hype behind UTest. It was a game changer. There's a lot of key testing influential people really got behind it. A lot of hype generated. In the earlier days, the platform wasn't quite as good as it is now. Your learning process, it didn't quite do what everyone wanted it to do. That hype starts to turn negative. People stop getting behind you, if you like, and start getting on top of you. But UTest is now coming out here. People are understanding what it's doing. The platform works. The model works. So most importantly, customer viewpoint. You can't ignore your customers. If your customers don't like something, they're not going to buy it. You're not going to make any money. So let's look at this market force from a customer viewpoint. So you have a new technology trigger. At that point, the customers don't know who you are. They don't know what you're talking about. There's nothing there. So they've not heard of you. But you start to generate the hype. You start to talk about your technology, your idea, your model. In today's world, when you've got blogs and tweets and websites, that hype starts to get generated. Competition might start coming along as well, which will also build into that hype. but your customers are starting to hear about you, and that hype is going. That expectation from your customers is coming back, and they're saying, great idea, great idea. They already know what they think they want it to do. Might be different to what you think it's going to do. So you need to be aware of that. And with that hype then comes the early adopters. So your product gets out there, you get some people who are brave and want to get on board. They've heard the hype, they want one. It doesn't work, or it doesn't work as they think it should work. So they either leave or they try out a competitor, and you've got to start thinking about managing, because it's a downward slope from there, and you've got to figure out a way to turn it around. Bubbles burst. Some of those customers will stick with you. They'll see the potential, and they'll get behind you, and they'll get on there. And once you've pulled out of that slump, hopefully you're on the road to recovery. Key here, though, ultimately, you want happy customers. You want customers who are getting what they wanted. They're getting value for money. They're not complaining. They're giving you positive press, and it keeps selling. So interestingly, a standard QA approach. Right at the start, technology trigger. I've got an idea. I don't have any money. I don't have any time. And actually, I just want to get this out fast. So I'm not going to engage with any kind of quality QA function or testing. They're just going to slow me down. You get to the peak. It's going well at that point. I've got loads of people now using my product, so I don't need testing. And then suddenly you realise, oh, hold on, nobody likes it. It's not working. It's not doing what I said it was going to do. But I actually don't have any money now, so I'm not quite sure where to go with this. And then hopefully there'll be some funding. There'll be a desire to pull out of that slope, and you'll engage with test at that point. But it starts costing a lot of money because you've already made the mistakes, and you've got to put a lot of effort into test then to really understand that feedback where people are saying, it's rubbish, it doesn't work. Well, okay, well, what am I going to do with that feedback? It doesn't help me. So you need to pay somebody to come in and put some thought and intelligence behind that. It's expensive, but hopefully you'll get through this. That trough might be a lot steeper and deeper than you'd liked, but you start then at that point to put together a formal process. You've learned your lessons. You know that you need to be thinking about quality, and you start to build from there, put some process in place, start scripting, start understanding what you need to do in terms of coverage. And you'll get there in the end. You'll get there late. It won't be particularly efficient, and it's going to cost you a fortune to learn from those mistakes. So what we're trying to suggest is you need to be thinking about quality straight away from the start. Testing isn't all about scripted tests. It's not all about getting a product developed and then engaging with a test guy to tell you it doesn't work. You can do it that way, but it's not a smart way to do it. Testers can add a lot of value early on in terms of light touch advisory stuff, about helping you to get your requirements right, doing static testing, all elements of tests that are cheap, quick, easy to do, aren't going to slow you down. And in effect, you get your requirements right, you get it developed right, it's actually speeding up the process. You get to the peak, you've got to kind of start controlling that at that point. So you've got to understand what it is your customers are expecting, getting, telling you. At this point, you should be thinking about using potentially crowdsourced services, thinking about who your demographics, who your users are going to be. Again, it's another quick, efficient, cost-efficient, and easily flexible way to get a lot of intelligent feedback and control that reaction. And also, it's a massive community out there. So if you can control that hype and get that closer to the actual, you should be able to smooth that out. There's still likely to be a trough, so you get into the trough and you've got to think about responding to that. At this point, you've got a stack of problems probably. You've got a stack of things you want to fix. You need to think about how you're going to prioritize that, how you're going to be putting that into releases, how you're going to plan those releases out, how you're going to communicate that. At this point, you'll start moving into more scripted testing because you need the structure and you need the confidence about the coverage. So it's starting to get a lot more formal, but you're still able to use a lot more of the cheaper, efficient and quick ways as well to generate the value. And this depth, if you go through the earlier processes, isn't going to be so bad. So hopefully you'll be able to save some cost at that point. Then you're thinking about illuminating the methods. So it's about more process-orientated things like going through Prince 2 methodology, for example, and it's about formalizing the processes, understanding what it is you're going to be doing, taking as many different elements of the toolkit as possible and applying them to the problem. And later on, instead of the late maturity, late efficiency, you should have achieved that back here now. This becomes getting efficient, thinking about doing it smarter, learning those lessons, not making the same mistake twice, applying everything in a smart way to get the maximum coverage, rather than having the biggest possible test team that you need to crunch everything that's going through. So I alluded a little bit to what I think that'll influence in terms of the curve. So here's your standard curve. What I'm suggesting is you take a quality focus. It's not going to slow things down at the start. It's going to speed things up because you're not going to have to go through so many iterations. You're going to get it right first time more often. So you should be able to hit this curve faster, which might mean you can get earlier investment. Things are working. If your quality is right and you're thinking about the quality and you're thinking about what it is your customers are wanting and expecting, and even better, getting that feedback from your potential customers, you can manage that expectation and you can start to meet their expectations or beat them rather than not live up to them. Which means instead of slumping down this curve and finding yourself with a big problem and no money to fix it, you might not need such a high level of reinvestment. There's still likely to be a slight downward curve there because excitement, people always get very excited about things. And you can minimize that trough and get there faster. Getting there faster is going to save you a lot of money. And it's going to beat the competition. So what am I recommending? Introduce quality as early as possible. I get asked the question quite a lot. When should I be thinking about testing? When should I be thinking about this? Oh, well, I haven't got the product ready yet, so I'm going to engage a few months down the line. It's too late. If you're starting to think about quality at that point, that's a good thing. At least you're asking yourself that question. But if you're asking the question, the time is now. Start to talk to people. It doesn't have to be expensive solutions. And it's about applying appropriate methods to tackle the problems that you've got in context to the product you're creating and in context to the market forces that you're having to contend with. And we've said it before, I know it came out in the U-Test presentation earlier, testing in the lab is no longer enough. With everyone holding a big megaphone through Twitter and Facebook and everything else, you have to be looking at ways to get access to that user and the infinite combinations of imperfect devices that your product is going to be going out on. To do that, you've got to be thinking outside of the lab. I'm not saying just do, and you've got to keep the lab testing, but think of other smart ways to get it done. So I'm hoping I've justified this statement. It's going to speed up the journey. It's going to save you money. And most importantly of all, delight your customer.